Has the impending computing apocalypse arrived? Why is modern computing so laced with problems, prone to being hacked, and hard to use? These and other questions will be answered in this podcast. This is Media Channels, a multimedia corp production, bringing you information about the latest media trends, helpful tutorials, and commentary on the digital world around you. Welcome everyone, my name is Stuart Rathje, hosting episode number 16 of the Media Channels podcast on this November the 30th, 2018. In today's fully packed episode titled The Technological Apocalypse, I will tackle the challenges of modern computing, and this episode will cover such topics such as disposable computing, how technology is getting harder to use, how I think it is changing too quickly, technology oversaturation, the effects of hacking, how we're losing knowledge and control of our technology, how computing is increasingly controlling us, and if we can really trust our tech companies. I will also go over some tech crowdfunding scams and how greed and laziness has affected us all, and even a near-miss doomsday scenario. The burning question everyone has is, are we heading to a technological dark age? And I say, perhaps. Since the golden age of computing, we have seen many devices come and go at an alarming rate, from mainframes to early desktop computing devices in universities, commercial computers, home computers such as the Atari, Commodore, and Apple, IBM, and many other companies that no longer exist. Never before have we been so surrounded by computing devices that invade every aspect of our lives. Smartphones, smartwatches, smart appliances, various other, the Internet of Things connected technology. We have large warehouses of server farms, and they have AI learning algorithms, and so on and so on. I am inclined to believe that we have surpassed the golden age of computing, and we are on a road to a major technological implosion. Why do I believe this? Well, let's consider these points. The first is technology is becoming more unreliable and cheaply made. And I don't mean affordably made, I mean cheaply made. Modern tech is typically farmed out to the cheapest source and done by people who don't understand the language and what the tech is being developed for, and what the problem is that's going to be solved with this technology. I find most technology is designed to be thrown away rather than be repaired. This includes TVs, monitors, phones, basically anything with a circuit board that the average person can't repair on their own without specialized tools. For example, this year, Apple has been in major fights with third-party repair providers over the right to fix your own computing devices. Louis Rossmann of the Rossmann Group repairs MacBooks, and he is currently in a legal battle over replacement batteries for these MacBooks. He imported them in, and they've been sitting at the border, and I don't know if they've been destroyed or not, but they've been deemed as counterfeit batteries, even though they're probably reliable, or technically Apple batteries, just not sold directly by Apple. So he's in a major legal battle with that, and I'm sure his customers are not too happy that they're not getting their MacBooks repaired. And it's not just Apple, but other companies are following this trend as well, that you don't have a right to repair your own technology. And this is phones, computers, and whatnot. In the past, and even to this day, if you've ever owned a computer, you may have noticed on the back where the case would come off. Usually there's a sticker if it's a OEM or major computer supplier where It says warranty void if removed. Okay, so this is just a continuation on from that battle. As well, technology, I find, is becoming harder and harder to use, despite what marketing managers would like you to believe. Even though on the surface, interfaces seem to be becoming cleaner looking and with less clutter, they are in fact becoming more unusable because they went too far in the minimalist design. So we have poorly designed user interfaces causing this. We have hidden features. So features which you may have had in the past are now hidden deep within the system that you can't get at. We have icons that have no discernible meaning. Phones that are getting harder to hold because, for one, their screen sizes are either getting bigger, perhaps they're getting the bezel-less design, right? The bezel-less design is getting harder to hold, harder to find a proper case for it, as well as they're getting taller as well. So the balance as well is not what I would like to hope. I've had an S3. I've had a old style Nokia flip phone. I find that the S3 was actually pretty decent. I was able to hold it nicely. I was able to text on it half decently. But now I have a 2017 version of the Samsung Galaxy S, and I'm not really a big fan of it whatsoever. And I've held the edgeless phones as well, and I'm not too happy with the way things are going in that department. As well, devices that you either do not control or is actually taking control of your life. Now, what I mean by this is it's not giving you the options to control your device. Rather, it's trying to get you to do what it wants you to do. We also have problems with confusing cable connectors or cables that look the same but do something very different. Depending on the platform that you're on or the system that you're using, and USB-C being one of the worst examples or prime examples of cable connector that does many different things across many different devices. It could be powering it, or it may not be powering it. It could be fast charging. It may have data or other video on it. And depending if it's who the manufacturer is of it, they may have built these features in. But just by looking at the cable, you wouldn't know what the specifications of that cable are. It just looks the same as all the other USB-C connectors. As well, what's making technology hard to use is the increased use of dongles instead of full-size connectors. So now you rely on a dongle to connect everything. So that's another thing to be carrying around with you, and then you lose it, or maybe it broke or something. Now you can't plug anything in, so everything is out now. Things like predictive text. Okay, predictive text is your phone usually trying to predict what sentences you're trying to use. Autocorrect, trying to guess your words, usually done in a poor manner or done just outright wrong. Voice recognition systems that rarely get it right, or they don't understand your voice, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, I mean, they do work to an extent, but they seem to be trying to steer you into a direction that they want you to steer you in. We also have technology that is changing far too quickly, and you could make this argument back to probably the 80s at least. But I think that technology is increasing. The change of technology is increasing even quicker than it did even 10 years ago. For instance, we have standards, computing standards that are changing every year, features that are changing every year. We have user interfaces that are changing and updating yearly or monthly sometimes, depending on the platform. This creates a serious disconnect when the users, they have to constantly adjust their way of thinking to use this new interface. There's always this new must-have gadget, this must-have computing device, smart dryers, smart fridges, any other cloud-connected devices over Wi-Fi usually. And these things change from year to year to year, and it's just confusing users. And a lot of the times when you upgrade these gadgets, they aren't compatible with the gadgets from just a couple years ago. We also have forced updates on phones. We have forced updates on computers and electronics, and this can break compatibility with the existing tech that you're using. Apple's a good one with the headphone connector. Another big problem right now is with printers. Windows 10, if you upgrade your Windows 10 installation to the newest version, there's a good chance that your printer may break in the process, depending on what system you're on as well. And these types of compatibility issues are not just for printers and phones, but it's across the entire industry. I also believe that we are becoming oversaturated with technology from many different vendors, and standards are going out the window. I believe we rely too much on computing technology in our daily lives. And I'm not just talking about smartphones and computers, but I'm talking about major systems here. So things like our power grid, hospital systems, diagnostic equipment, our banks, government systems, homes, businesses are all connected via a complicated spider web of connectivity. All of these systems are prone to disaster, and it does happen, and it's happened in the past, and it happens quite often. For instance, we had a major blackout in 2003. For those of you around during then, the eastern seaboard was out for days, and this included parts of New York, parts of Ontario, Quebec, Pennsylvania, and it was just a crazy time if you lived in any of these places. Then good thing it was in the middle of summer, because if this would have happened in the wintertime, we would have had some major problems. There would have been chaos. There was a major bank outage. The Royal Bank had a major outage in 2004. I remember this quite distinctly. I wasn't able to withdraw or deposit funds in my account. This happened it was more than just a couple hour outage. It just happened for at least 2 or 3 days, if I remember correctly. We had, there's also been online banking outages. CIBC recently had one as well that lasted, I believe, maybe a day. I'm not sure how long that one lasted, because I don't bank at CIBC. Another major issue we have is with aging technology. With these above organizations, a lot of the time these organizations won't update their technology because they're afraid of breaking their existing systems, but in the process of not upgrading, sometimes they wait too long and end up with systems that are either breaking on their own, or they no longer have skilled labor that requires them to operate and fix these older devices. There are some major organizations out there with running systems that are 30 or 40 years old, and the number of people who actually can operate them is dwindling quite quickly. Wall Street, for instance, and other stock exchanges are all connected via the internet and other electronic systems. They are not immune to attack either. They've had their own problems in the past. More and more often, I find computing technology is being hacked, and it is being hacked into more easily, namely because the systems and the software are becoming more and more complicated. Facebook had a data breach in March of this year, and this breach involved 87 million and counting user accounts that were involved in this data breach. There was another breach with the Security Exchange Commission. This is a major deal in the States. It had a data breach that involved illicit trading. So insider trading. So we're not sure how that affected the stock market, but I'm sure it did somehow. Equifax had a recent data breach as well. For credit reports. More than 143 million U.S. customers were affected, and this involved the financial information and social security numbers of these accounts. Yahoo's database dump, I mentioned this in a previous podcast, from 2013, involved 3 billion user accounts, right? So username and passwords again. This one is a little less known. Adult Friend Finder is a dating site. This one involved 412 million user accounts compromised. eBay, another big company, 145 million accounts compromised. That included names, addresses, dates of birth, and passwords. Target, major department store, had a breach in 2013 that involved 110 million accounts. And the popular Uber app, taxi service, had 57 million users and 600,000 drivers involved in a data breach that not only involved personal information, but driver license information as well. That one is pretty major. And yet another one, we had a major bank in the States, JP Morgan Chase, in 2014, lost the details of 76 million households and 7 million businesses, including their personal information. Popular console, the Sony PlayStation Network, there was a hack that involved the most popular online gaming platforms. This included desktop games as well. Had 77 million user accounts hacked, or, well, dumped, I guess, involving personal information and passwords. Again, the same. We also had a major worm go around back over 10 years ago. This was called the Stuxnet worm, and this happened between 2005 and 2010. And this worm pretty much went unknown for 5 years before someone knew about it. And what happened was, the only reason why anybody knew about it is because 984 uranium enrichment centrifuges went offline in Iran, and it affected Siemens scatternuclear systems as well. Okay, basically that's what this system was. So if these things are being hacked into these nuclear systems, that's a major issue here. As well, VeriSign in 2010 had a data breach in their systems, and VeriSign is a company that provides certificates. I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast, but they sign security certificates for websites so you can do secure online shopping. They never came forward with just how bad the breach was, but it couldn't have been good. As well, Home Depot in 2014 lost the credit and debit card information of 56 million customers. In 2013, Adobe lost credit card records of 38 million users, which was compromised, as well as their username and passwords to go along with it. And this only covers some of the more public breaches. If you go on Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo, do a search for data breaches the last decade, you'll find there's a lot of smaller companies as well involved. And it is dreadfully obvious that current computing technology is not secure, and it is often released before it is ready. And the companies that are in control are certainly not controlling their software, and they really don't understand how their own software works in majority of these cases. That's why these breaches are happening. Companies are relying on a lot of third parties and outsourcing to develop their software, and it's creating this major problem. I also believe that we are losing control, and we're losing knowledge of how all these systems work and interact with each other. For instance, the modern software in cars, computers, and whatnot, they number in the millions of lines of code, okay? This is just basic software. I'm not talking about anything complicated like a major operating system. Microsoft has surpassed millions of lines of code a long time ago in their Windows versions. And Google, in their ecosphere, in their online ecosphere, it's predicted that they are running billions of lines of code on their online systems as well. So just the sheer complexity of how everything interacts with each other is becoming a major issue. What's happening is too many people are working on one piece of software without knowing the entirety of how it works. So you have, let's say, Windows or a Google platform. They might take on this tiny little area of the operating system, but they don't know how it's necessarily interacting with the rest of the system. And this is where a lot of problems are coming up. As well, so much of our technology relies on libraries, okay? So libraries are basically just tiny pieces of software that do a specific task, okay? In the Linux world, libraries pretty much run everything, okay? And libraries, they come from multiple different vendors. So one program might actually run off of 100 or more different libraries depending on what kind of software it is. And each of these libraries is usually coming from a different vendor. And it's creating these complicated dependencies with each other. So if one of these libraries breaks for some reason or has a security issue, it can affect the entire software or all the other libraries that are connected to it. These programs, the problem I see is that these programs are not developing the software themselves from scratch. What they're doing is relying on libraries from many different vendors to create. They're basically assembling a program rather than writing a program. And this is what the problem is, because they don't necessarily know how the library works when they create these programs. They only know how they assembled it, right? There are certain programs out there that do everything from scratch, which is great. But for the majority of software vendors, they're not doing this. They're relying on libraries from so many different sources, and this creates security issues, backdoors, and who knows what other problems are going on. As well, I believe that technology is moving away from devices that perform tasks for the user. For instance, an axe, okay? An axe is just an axe. You hold on to it and you swing it, and it's up to you how you swing it and how you want to use it. The problem with technology today is it is moving away from that methodology. The tool is actually controlling you rather than you controlling the tool. For instance, we have predictive text and autocorrect. So what is happening is that the AI is constantly trying to learn what it is that you're doing. And this usually happens on your phone, okay? And there are servers in place that will learn what you're typing on your phone and then try to predict and guess what your behaviors are going to be. But the problem is that these behaviors are programmed to think in a certain way. Not really think in a certain way, but they're programmed to interact with you in a certain way. So it's actually, in a way, influencing you. So these user interfaces are actually forcing you into their paradigm of thinking. In essence, it's training you how to talk, how to text, and how to behave, and how it expects you to behave. And if you don't behave in that way, then you will run into problems with that technology. I also find as well that modern tech companies have a bad habit of solving problems that no one had in the first place, okay? Creating solutions that nobody asked for. Devices that are connected to devices that are connected to the cloud for no apparent reason and controlled by your phone. So here are some examples of these devices, okay? And these are some of the most ridiculous devices I've seen. I looked these up and I couldn't believe they actually existed. The first on this mini list is a blender. This blender is Wi-Fi connected and controlled by your phone, okay? why would I need a blender that is connected to the internet and controlled by my phone? If I want to blend something, why would I not just press the button on the blender to start? When I'm done blending, I press the button again to turn it off. It's very simple. If I was going to use my phone to control that blender, I would have to get out my phone, unlock it, go to the app, and then turn the blender on. Okay, it's just so pointless. Most ridiculous part of this is it had major funding from major vendors to get this thing out there. I'm assuming it flopped. I didn't check to see if anyone was actually buying these things, but I mean, it's mind-boggling how these people are thinking. And the next thing, most ridiculous thing I found is a frying pan that detects what was in it. Seriously, this frying pan, you put stuff in the frying pan and it would tell you what is in the frying pan. I mean, if you're putting stuff in the frying pan, wouldn't you already know what is in the frying pan? Why would you need this? It's just such a useless device. And again, it's had major sponsors. There's also the Bluetooth. Okay, Bluetooth is the wireless technology. A Bluetooth enabled toothbrush, and what you do with this toothbrush is you open up the app and it'll remind you how to brush your teeth. Okay, I mean, come on, are you really that bad that you don't know how to brush your own teeth and you need a reminder every time that you brush your teeth? Oh, let's open up my phone so I can connect it to my toothbrush and then I can learn how to brush my teeth. I mean, seriously, these things are ridiculous. And then there's the bottle opener. I mean, this one's not as bad, but it's a little bit quirky and weird. I don't know why you would want to do this, but there's a bottle opener out there that will text you when you open, or not text you, it will text your friends when you have a drink. So when you pop off the cap off it, it'll text your friends, oh, I'm having a drink right now. I mean, I don't understand this one at all. I mean, are you that much of a narcissist that you need to tell everybody when you open a drink? I mean, well, maybe it's trying to tell your friends that, why don't you come over and let's have a drink? Maybe that's how it works. I don't know. But anyways, and then my favorite, and these ones you see at department stores all the time, and some people will probably hate me for this, but smart light bulbs. I mean, I don't get these things at all. I mean, if you want to turn on a light, you go into the room, you flick the light switch on, you flick the light switch off when you're done. Is that hard? Is that so hard? But the smart light bulbs, oh, I want to control with my phone. Okay, I come into a room. Oh, let's open my phone. Okay, let's unlock it. Let's go to the app. Okay, let's turn it on. Oh, geez. Yeah, granted, there are some smart light bulbs out there that you can allow you to change the colors and do some weird effects and stuff like that. And maybe in the off chance, oh, I left my light on at home. Okay, I'm going to turn it off. But I mean, for most people, they don't live in giant warehouses where they have 1,000 banks of lights that they have to worry about. I could see that being maybe useful for a big factory or something, and they want to be able to control how much power they're using and stuff like that. But for most people, you're living in a home. How many light bulbs do you realistically have? How many rooms do you really have in your house that you can't just switch the light on and switch it off before you leave? I mean, it's not hard to switch it off. I mean, forget. Yeah, okay, you might forget once in a while, but I mean, is it really the end of the world that you don't switch your light off? Probably not, okay? And this is the craziness of this technology, the Internet of Things that I've been talking about. It's just so many useless products out there that are connected. And the worst thing about these products is that they're not designed with security in mind at all. So people are able to hack into these devices very easily because there's no security whatsoever in a lot of these devices. And you can look it up on the internet. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but a lot of devices which you think are secure are not secure. And another point, why I think the impending technological apocalypse is nearing is that tech companies will outsource and cut corners far too much in their software development than they should be. I touched on this a little bit already, but what's happening is there's a general lack of understanding and knowledge about the product that they're developing, and they don't understand the implications of what they're developing and things such as security and usability and whatnot, and what's going on in the background. A lot of these companies will outsource software development, and this includes places like India and other foreign countries. More often than not, they don't understand the primary language that they're developing the software for, but they don't understand what the software is going to be used for. And typically these developers are paid pennies, and they deliver a subpar product full of bugs and other problems and bad grammar and just a whole host of other usability issues. I think that companies should be focusing on developing software and technology for their own culture and their own countries. I believe that globalization has hurt the technology sector in a way that might be unrecoverable. I don't think we can turn back the clock anymore. I think the only solution that these companies are thinking is that they have to keep moving forward. And if they keep moving forward, eventually the whole system is going to collapse and we're going to be back to square one, possibly in a technological dark age. And we could be in a literal dark age because a lot of the information we depend on is stored in electronic devices. Companies will cut costs on hardware development to save $1 or a few pennies. For instance, the headphone connector on the iPhone. A lot of companies are removing things from their hardware just so they can save a few dollars. It's not helping the situation whatsoever. And one of the big things I think that could be contributing to this technological apocalypse is that our technology is more and more becoming a tool to control the masses rather than a tool to accomplish a task for the user. Okay, so NPCs or non-player characters, okay, this has been around since video games have been around basically. An NPC is basically just a AI-driven computer character. It really doesn't do much except just stand there usually and answer some very basic questions, and it's fed information from the programming. NPCs is actually just a current buzzword for zombies, okay? So people in a way have been zombified and are being fed information from central media sources and cloud-based services more and more and more, and they're relying on these cloud services and these media sources for their daily lives more and more. And it doesn't matter if they're in school, if they're on the internet, or in a work organization. People are, in my opinion, are unwittingly becoming a part of this groupthink mentality that these devices are providing, right? These tools are not solving problems, but they're sources to feed you information. And they're not solving problems whatsoever. And these NPCs, okay, I call them NPCs because that's the buzzword right now. There's a lot of, if you go on Google and search for NPC outrage or something, you'll come up with some interesting stories about left versus right wing type of politics. But anyways, I think these people should be paying attention to what is going on around themselves and thinking critically about what they're using on a daily basis. The fact of the reality is they are not doing this, and they're just blindly using this technology without any concern whatsoever of how it could be affecting them in the long run. And I find it a bit unnerving when you can walk into an establishment like a restaurant, you could take a walk in a park, or otherwise be in a public place, and just watch how many people are totally buried in their phones and totally oblivious to what is happening around them. And if you don't believe me, I've been noticing this more and more over the last 5 years, but this year more so than ever, this oblivious behavior. I can go and walk around a park, and I've done this this summer, and I see a lot of people on park benches, typically younger people, will be buried on their phone. Older people generally don't understand the technology, so they're not necessarily using it anyways. I'm not saying all old people are technologically illiterate or anything. I'm just saying they just don't find interest in it or for whatever reason. But you will notice, because they're oblivious to what's happening, you can literally walk right up to them and be maybe 4 or 5 feet away from them and stare right at them, and they won't even notice that you're there. That's how bad it has become. It's something you could try. Maybe you've already tried it. I don't want anyone to go out there and try to creep anybody out and think what are you going to do? Like, are you an axe murderer or something? But the thing is, if they're not noticing you coming up to them and staring right at them, what is really going on in their heads, right? It's a psychological thing that's happening. I mean, an axe murderer could come up and they wouldn't even notice that you were there. See, you could try it yourself, but again, don't get into trouble doing this. I mean, maybe stand a little further away and just see what happens. I mean, you don't have to try it, but you can take my word for it. I mean, this is how some people are reacting to it, okay? And then there's the problem with the technology that we actually need, okay? Because so many people are influenced by social media and this technology that they're consuming on a daily basis, they're not actually learning about the technology that they're using. So important technology such as our power grid are not really understood. Very few people in the future, I believe, are not going to know how to fix some of the major infrastructure that we have built up. And because of this, because they never bothered to learn, and because they've been too enthralled with their smart devices, social media, and smartwatches and whatever, they're not going to be able to fix these issues. And then very few people are going to be able to actually control it. There could be blackouts and brownouts and who knows what else would happen. I'm a firm believer, if you're going to use a device, you should have at least some understanding of how it works. I mean, for instance, if you're driving a car, know some of the basics. There are people out there who don't know how to put gas in their car. Things like changing your oil, that's something, just some of the basics. You don't have to know how to rebuild an entire engine, but at least know some of the basics so that if there's ever a situation that comes up, at least you know some way to get around a potential issue. And if we apply this to the greater society, things like our power grid and infrastructure, hospitals and whatnot, people are going to be using it, but they don't understand how it works. They're going to be left in the dark eventually, in my belief anyways. As well, cloud services are increasingly being pushed as the next best thing since sliced bread in the technology sector. What people don't realize, though, about the cloud services is that, well, maybe they do, but a lot of people probably don't, is that cloud services are collecting hordes and hordes of information about your personal life. And this includes your lifestyle. It includes about how you shop, how you think in some ways, how you're texting other people, the way you use language. Basically, when you use a lot of these devices, you are signing away your privacy in its entirety. You have no rights to your privacy anymore. Location services are on by default on most smart devices. If you're trying to find your way around a new city, you turn on location services and you go to Google Maps or something, right? So you sign away your rights. And then what these organizations can then do is, when they harvest your data, is further influence your decisions by suggesting to you what you should be buying online, what you should be reading online or listening to online. And this is done in the form of suggested content. I mean, you'll know this right away. A lot of people will notice this, that if you go on a website, if you've been logged into Google, Microsoft, or some other account, it will give you tailored suggestions for advertising and what you should be buying, or what it thinks it wants you to buy. And you will actually be constantly spammed with these suggested contents. For instance, on YouTube, in the right sidebar, suggested videos, until you give into watching it, purchasing it, whatever action it is that they want you to do. So in essence, it's creating a miniature echo chamber for yourself, and you dare not venture from this miniature echo chamber, because what's basically happening is you're slowly becoming addicted to it. You're not going to be venturing out to your own sort of sphere of understanding and knowledge, because you keep being pushed the same things over and over and over again. It may not be what you necessarily want, but because you've already been acclimatized to it, now you'll just naturally want to watch and consume the same media over and over again. And I believe that people are so consumed, not necessarily everyone, but some people are so consumed and addicted that they can hardly put their phone down, even in their cars, at all. And I see this on the roads all the time, where people are texting or on their phones, and they're not supposed to be in Canada and Ontario anyways. They can get a major fine if caught. But for distracted driving, it's become such an issue. I see every time I go out, I see at least a couple of people who are on their phones, and this doesn't matter if they're at a light or driving. They don't care. And this technology has taken over, and it has created this addictive personality in these people, and they can no longer put down their phones or other devices for fear of, fear of rejection maybe, or something anyways. This technology is taking control away from you and is instead controlling you. So instead of a tool that you control, again, it controls you. And I believe in 40 years' time, maybe less, maybe more. I mean, this is just a rough estimate, but in 40 years' time, I think it's possible that we will not know how to drive our vehicles anymore, because Google and other companies are experimenting with self-driving cars as a solution to distracted driving, for one thing, and maybe for just bad drivers in general. They think that this is a solution to distracted driving, but no, the real solution is to put down the phone. And if we do come to a point in the future where we rely on our vehicles to drive us around, I think what is going to happen is, if we have a failure somewhere in our system, and you can't tell me that the system will never fail or never get hacked. It will happen. It's happened so many times in the past. I mean, it's crazy to think that it won't happen in the future. And if our driving systems fail because they're all connected together, we may be in a situation where a major highway may experience 1,000-car pileup because all the devices failed at the same time. So again, the solution isn't technology that controls us more. The solution is to put down your phone and disconnect yourself, at least for a little while. But heaven forbid that we should do that. For some people, they're so addicted that they can't do this. And that's unfortunate. The next reason on my list of why I think the impending technological apocalypse is coming is because of data mining and data storage rates. Because of all the data mining that's going on, data storage is increasing at an alarming rate, and the amount of information that we need to store is increasing at an alarming rate. And to have reliable backups of the information that we actually need is becoming harder and harder to achieve.
Let me explain this a little better. So, for instance, we have traditional hard drives. Okay, so hard drives are basically basically any technology that stores information. Okay, even your phone, it doesn't have a hard drive per se. It has storage memory, but it's essentially a drive that stores your data. Okay, so traditional hard drives, what's used in desktop computers, laptops, server farms where Google and other companies are storing all your information, are installing more and more and more and more hard drives to try to keep up with the demand of the media that we're consuming and the information that we're going through on a daily basis. The problem is with traditional hard drives is that they're starting to hit a wall with the amount of storage that they can. It's getting harder and harder for the hard drive manufacturers to actually produce reliable and hard drives that are large enough to store this data in a reliable method. Hard drives, they're not really a long-term backup solution. They're sort of meant to be used on a daily basis, to be turned on and off. Hard drives can fail over time if they're not plugged in. They need to be constantly sort of turned on, at least maybe once a year, done a scan on to see if it's experiencing things like bit rot, if it's having mechanical failure. Sometimes the air will leak out of a hard drive. Sometimes what can happen with hard drives is that the lubrication in the hard drive will dry up, and many other issues. So hard drives really are not a long-term solution to backing up your data, and it's unfortunate because hard drives used to be the most reliable thing, but because media sizes are increasing so much, it's becoming harder for these devices to store data reliably. Tape backup solutions as well, which has been the go-to backup solution in the industry for many, many, many years, and has been the reliable solution, are struggling as well, and being used less and less because, for instance, tape backups require bigger and bigger spools and more densely packed data rates to achieve the backups that we're throwing at it. And because they're becoming slower, and the backups time frame is becoming longer and longer and longer. So tape backups are still being used, but it's harder to justify using them in a backup solution because of the ballooning size of the media that we're throwing on it. And the biggest offender with media size is obviously video and audio. Then we have solid state storage, which is fast, blazingly fast. You'll find it in modern desktops and laptops. It's basically a souped up version of a USB stick. But the problem with solid state drives is they are not reliable at all, and they don't hold data for extended periods of time whatsoever. USB sticks are USB sticks are really bad at reliability. I would never back up anything to a USB stick because over time it will definitely fail and you will lose everything. I've had so many USB sticks fail I can't even think about it anymore. And solid state media is basically just a souped up USB stick. They're great for server farms and for fast media and for doing things quickly, but you have to eventually back up your data off of those things to get reliability or simply replace it. And as well, we rely on big companies, and this is a problem. We rely on big companies to store all of our data. And the reason why this is a problem is because these companies are struggling to keep up with the demand for the amount of media that's being thrown at it. And these server farms are struggling to replace the drives that keep failing. And a lot of these server farms are moving the way into SSD storage, and these things have to be constantly replaced because they have a limited number of writes and reads that they can do before they outright fail. And the thing with SSD drives is once they fail, they fail. There's no early warning detection whatsoever. With traditional hard drives, they will actually usually will slowly fail over time, and you start noticing issues, and you can say, "Oh, my data is in jeopardy. I can go back it up somewhere else." Not with SSD. Once an SSD fails, it fails. There's no getting the information back unless you want to spend thousands and thousands of dollars and send it to a data recovery services. So these large companies are struggling to keep up with the demands of the media. And in all honesty, I think we simply do not have a reliable long-term data retention solution anymore. All our archiving now is done by constantly swapping out failing media. For instance, even in my own office here, my own company, I have to be very vigilant about my data. I have a NAS, a network attached storage system. Okay, it has hard drives in there, and it backs up on a daily basis. And then what happens to that is I back it up again. Okay, but the problem is these drives, because they're running all the time, they need to be constantly checked. And if one fails, I have to go run out and buy another drive and swap it in there, and so on and so on and so on. So I might get 3 years, 4 years if I'm lucky on one of these drives before I have to swap it out. And I don't even have very large drives, but the larger drives do fail at a more consistent rate and earlier, I'm finding. And another point why I think this is we're going to implode, the technology implosion, I think is because of crowdfunding technologies. Now, this might seem like a little bit of an odd one, but I think that crowdfunding technology products are only adding flame or gasoline to the fire. A lot of crowdfunding technologies are poorly conceived. They don't work. They generally cost higher than properly manufactured products. They're improperly designed by amateurs. And a lot of these projects will end up just scamming gullible people in the end. For instance, we have some of the big name crowdfunding failures. Okay, the first on this mini list is solar roadways. I don't know if you ever heard about solar roadways. I mean, you probably have. So the solar roadways project was a complete disaster. It still is a disaster. It cost, the project crowdfunded $3.9 million to develop. And the first city that installed a solar roadway wasn't actually a solar roadway, but it's more like a solar pad in the middle of a walkway that was about 50 by 50 feet square. When they installed it, it broke within a week and then caught fire. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't think they even bothered fixing it to this point. So I don't know how much the city paid for this. I'm pretty sure they probably paid in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this stupid thing installed. Ended up breaking right away and then caught fire. And it snowed, and there was snow on top of it, so it stopped working. And it was just a total disaster. Because obviously the people who were building this technology had no idea what they were doing. They didn't have proper business experience, and they didn't have a manufacturing background, obviously, and they just went ahead with it. $3.9 million down the drain. And all those people who funded this project are probably very upset with it. Then there was the self-filling water bottle. Okay, so this water bottle was supposed to self-fill itself from the moisture in the air. Okay, obviously it sounds a little fishy already. And the self-filling water bottle never ended up launching because the product never worked. They had a flashy video, but the problem is they're trying to create a dehumidifier, but as you know, a dehumidifier is a very large and bulky product, and it takes a while to actually, and it requires a lot of power to dehumidify the air and get the water out of it. So they kept changing the design. Eventually they went bankrupt, obviously, and its donators had donated over $340,000 towards this project. I think it was a Kickstarter or Indiegogo project, and they never got anything out of it. So again, I'm sure there was a lot of angry people on that one. And then there was the lesser known USB stick, which was called the My ID key, which was basically a USB stick that included a fingerprint reader. And this fingerprint reader would then allow you to plug it into your computer or computing device and then unlock your passwords. It would remember your website passwords and whatnot. And on the surface, it sounds like a decent idea. But again, they raised $500,000 for this project, and then they raised $3 million in venture capital, but they never delivered a final product. Oh my goodness. And apparently, just recently, another company had bought out Archemy, and to this day, I just went on there today, there are still refund requests on their Kickstarter page. And if this company went bankrupt, then oh my goodness, I'm sure this is ticked off a lot of people who wanted this device. Again, scammers. So these and other scammers, they love these crowdfunding platforms, as it's easy to promise the world a technology product that'll make their lives better and da. They'll throw up a flashy video, all the gullible people will jump on it, and in the end they'll deliver nothing or a product that barely works, right? It's almost like the shopping channel again with all these useless products, but this time it's with the technology products on the internet. Crowdfunding to design the product. And the last thing on my impending doom list is I think that major technology companies have become so greedy, and they so often cut corners, they so often bypass laws, and their tendency to create devices that look good rather than function well for its users will contribute to this impending apocalypse. Do you remember Bendgate? Okay, so this was the iPhone, I believe it's the 6 or 6C, probably it's iPhone 6. The iPhone was bending very easily in people's pockets. I know people were accused it was a hipster thing because hipsters were wearing their tight jeans and they were bending their brand new iPhones out of shape so easily after a day of sitting on it or something. I don't know, something to that effect. So again, they could have used better materials in their phone, but no, they wanted to have a hip and phone that was really thin, but they cut corners and they cut on materials so they could get a phone that looked great. A lot of angry people there. Apple as well. They had the cell phone issue. I think it was the iPhone 4 had a cell phone signal issue where if you held the phone in a certain way, you would lose 2 or 3 bars of your cell phone reception. And a lot of people are having this issue, and Apple in their, cutting corners again. Oh, so you know what? It's not our fault. It's not our fault that you're losing cell phone reception on your phone. It's because you're holding it wrong. You're supposed to hold it with just half of your hand, maybe don't hold the other side. And the problem was the antenna was on the bottom left corner of the phone, and the natural thing people are doing is holding the phone with their hand, and they're touching it with their fingers, and it would block the antenna in the phone. And then Apple eventually came out with some bumpers or some ridiculous thing to try to mitigate the issue, but it was too little too late again. And these companies keep doing this over and over again. Apple still does stupid stuff like this to this very day. Every one of their products has some ridiculous issue like this because they cut in corners and they just want to make it look good rather than function well. There's the company Foxconn. Okay, Foxconn is a technology company that builds a lot of computer parts as well as mobile phone parts, including parts for Apple and other cell phone companies and motherboards and whatnot. They are such a terrible company to work for that their factory workers were actually committing suicide on the factory floors. Their workers were depressed and overworked. They were way too tired. There was reports of some workers working 16 and 18-hour shifts to try to meet demands of Apple and other companies. And because there were so many suicides, they ended up having to install suicide nets on their buildings and inside their buildings so they could prevent employees from jumping off and committing suicide. And that is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. This hit the news. This is about 4 years ago now. You can look it up if you want to know the details of it. And then there was Microsoft. They've had lawsuits pretty much every second year for as long as they were around. But Microsoft had a major lawsuit regarding Internet Explorer back in the day. My day, I guess. But anyways, where Internet Explorer was pre-installed into the Windows operating system, and it would basically take over for the internet. It wouldn't really let other browsers be the default browser, and it was trying to dissuade other browsers from actually installing on their operating system. So there's a major lawsuit around that. And they were driving away competition in that regard. And, the sort of corporate greed, I'm not going to say corporations are bad, but this corporate greed, I think, contributes to this impending implosion that is on the horizon. Google as well was sued and lost an antitrust case earlier this year for $5.1 billion. That's $5.1 billion, and this involved how its search engine was installed on Android devices. Okay, so it wanted Google, obviously, to be the only search engine on their phone. So they were sued for that reason. If you go real far back, this is not what I'm talking about is not new. This has been going back to the 80s and 90s. Okay, in the 90s, the Intel had a Pentium CPU bug that caused math errors in their program. Okay, so it wasn't a real big deal, but if you were in a industry that required very precise mathematical calculations, this could have been a problem. So if you're maybe in a nuclear power plant, or you're in doing some really scientific work, this could have been a real issue. But Intel at the time thought, well, you know what, this math error that's the processor generating is really not seen that often, so we're not going to really fix it right away. And they didn't really fix this bug in their processor until later generations. I think in some limited cases you were able to get a replacement processor with a newer revision, but for the most part, nobody really took advantage of that. And then there was a major technological issue in 1991. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but during the Persian Gulf War, there was there's missiles basically flying back and forth between the U.S. and in the Middle East, and a Patriot anti-Scud missile that was designed to take out the other side's missiles had failed to hit its target. And because of this, there was a software bug in the way the missile was being fired, and it caused 28 soldiers' lives because of that. So again, this is a clear-cut case of how poor software development or poor technology can result in lost people's lives. Another older one is the Black Monday stock market crash. This happened in 1987, and this stock market crash, because of software bugs, saw a total dip in, was it the Dow Jones? Anyways, there was a 22.6% dip in the total value of that index because of the software bugs. And if that can happen, then what would, if that something like that were to happen today? Could it really mess up the financial markets? And this could really cause an issue because financial markets aren't stable as it is. And if this were to happen today, it might cause a real panic worldwide. And finally, as I promised, this is the doomsday, the near doomsday miss one. And finally, this one is much less known. And actually, I didn't even know about it until I saw it today as I was doing my research. But in 1983, we nearly went to nuclear war because of software bugs in Soviet missile detection systems. Okay, this is something out of a movie. This is crazy stuff here. So what happened is their early missile detection system in the Soviet Union detected a single intercontinental ballistic nuclear missile, and supposedly it was heading towards the Soviet Union from the United States. Okay, it was just one reported missile. Okay, so luckily the lieutenant who was in charge of this in the USSR of this detection system reasoned that it was unlikely that the U.S. was unlikely to send just one single missile, and thus in turn did not respond with a counterstrike, and thus a potential nuclear war was averted. But the craziest thing about this whole story is that instead of praising the lieutenant for not firing back of this software bug, that there was no missile in the sky whatsoever, okay, it was just a bug in the software, he was actually reprimanded on a technicality because the scientists and the supervisors who were in charge of this missile detection systems were afraid of being punished because of the poor software. And that's unfathomable. The guy should get a medal or something, you know? Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. If your software nearly caused a global nuclear war, I think this guy should be praised as a hero, but not reprimanded. You know, it's ridiculous. And all because the supervisors and the software engineers were either too lazy or too incompetent to perform their duties. It's just utter ridiculousness. And if you think that's isolated to the USSR, this has only become more widespread. In many industries, we have a lot of people who are lazy, we have a lot of people who are incompetent, a lot of people who aren't paid enough, a lot of people who are overworked in the technology sector, and they're making mistakes. And we're lucky that we just haven't made a big one yet. And just think, if they were having these software issues and tech issues that long ago with systems that were much simpler and easier to debug, how much more likely is it that today's current systems of increased complexity are prone to failure, they're prone to bugs, and even more errors? I mean, you just have to look at any average operating system or computing device today, and you'll see the amount of problems and constant updates that are going on. We are, as a society, and as an IT crowd, we are constantly putting out fires to prevent these systems from totally collapsing. We're constantly patching holes in our technology, just like our city streets. I mean, if you live in Thunder Bay, you know our city streets are a complete mess, potholes all over the place. We have patches on top of patches. I know Detroit has a lot of infrastructure issues as well. We're just hoping that the whole system won't completely disintegrate. We just keep putting more and more stuff on top of it and hoping that it's not going to fall apart completely. And it's amazing. It is amazing that we haven't blown ourselves up yet or taken out our electrical grid because someone clicked the wrong button because of software bugs or simply because of greed. And I think if we keep going at our current rate, we will end up in a technological dark age. And information about our progress as a society will be lost. Our technology will cease to innovate and even become unrepairable and disposable because we no longer how to either use it or fix it. is this a society that we've created where we totally trust in our technology? Where are we heading exactly? Is it maybe our friends the Terminators will take over where we are failing right now? But anyways, let me know in the comments what you think about our worst and best case scenarios for our modern technological age. And this pretty much wraps up this episode of the podcast. And as always, I want to thank you for watching or listening. You can leave questions for me in the comment section. Also, to view or listen to more of these podcasts, you can like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel by using the watermark in the bottom right corner, or follow me on Twitter. You can also listen to these episodes on Libsyn, iTunes, and Stitcher, or for a full list of podcasting platforms, please see the description or visit our website at multimedia.ca/media-channels. And I appreciate your support, and great Scott, I hope to see you in the future. No pun intended.